Welcome to The Fresh Cut with me, Cara Wietstock, culture editor at Ganjapreneur. We like to get straight to the source with this video interview series and talk to the people who are on the ground making the cannabis industry great. This week, we're joined by Bianca Blanche, a former budtender and the current host of That Budtender Podcast, which is a podcast that takes you inside the weed shop for firsthand details on what really happens on the retail floor. So Bianca, welcome. Thank you for being with me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I love listening to your pod, so I was really excited when you accepted the interview.
I really appreciate that. You have no idea.
I'd love to just jump right in and ask you what drew you to budtending and when you started back in the day.
Okay. So I started budtending back in 2015, but I knew it was something that I wanted to pursue. In 2014, I was living in New York. I was working as a bridal consultant. So I was like, say yes to the dress girl, if that gives you an idea. And I was so jaded and over that job and that industry at that point, and I had already begun self-medicating with cannabis, that it was just kind of like, well, what would be the complete opposite of dealing with crazy brides in New York City? And I was like, budtending, selling cannabis on the West Coast legally, and just like really immersing myself into that world.
I, for some reason, thought you were working in bridal in LA. So you made the move across the country for cannabis.
I did. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah. Totally worth it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth it. And New York bride's a whole new vibe than what I was originally imagining.
And we were like, you're cool, like downtown. Like we started in the West Village and then the space we grew. And so we moved down to Tribeca, which again, you would just think like, oh yeah, just like super cool and chic. And they just weren't cool. Like some girls were super cool. And then some girls were just monsters.
And you know, that actually speaks to the budtending who you're serving in that too, because it's a real mixed bag. But yeah. I kind of want to talk a little more about the people drawn to the job because it's diverse in multiple ways. What do you think people that are drawn to budtending have in common, aside from loving cannabis? Because it's a type of service, really.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think those two things, really, I think everyone who's doing it has most likely been profoundly impacted by the plant and felt that calling to work with her. And then I think the other thing is genuinely enjoying being of service to people and to being of service to your community. Maybe not everyone goes into it thinking that, but like, I mean, you gotta enjoy that feeling because that's all you're doing.
Yeah, I always picked up, when I was budtending, I'd pick up like these sweet little babies. It didn't matter what age they were, but like these people who were really gentle and like you would always know what they wanted. And I think the people that last in the job are definitely, they tap into being of service and they're like, this is for me, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I think I've had a lot of random jobs in my life, but I do think that is a common thread. But for sure, the longest space I've ever done that in was in budtending.
Yeah. It's funny because it has a high turnover rate, budtending. And now that I'm an office gal in my home office all the time on LinkedIn, there's a lot of like the upper management and executives who I don't think spend a lot of time on the floor complaining about that turnover. And I can see, because I've been on kind of both ends, like this disconnect. They don't understand how hard budtenders are really working. And a lot of the comments will be like, oh, it's laziness, or, budtenders are like the least lazy, like your feet hurt so bad. If you've worked a 420, you know that budtenders are not lazy.
Oh my God, that's like our Black Friday.
So I'm curious if you have insight as someone who's lived it, of how an executive staff, a management staff can better support their retail and floor budtending staff to create, because I have my ideas, but I want to hear yours first, to like create an environment that grows people's talent rather than just burn out and leave.
That's such a great question. Well, that's the thing. It's like, start by asking that question.
Yeah.
Like, talk to your budtenders, I mean, I worked at the shop 4 years, and maybe the owners could pick me out of a lineup. Maybe they could.
Yeah.
You feel me? So not being present and not showing your presence at all, like, it's insulting in my opinion, because here we are, like you said, like on our feet, especially in like Prop 215 days, like 11, 13-hour days.
Yeah.
Like, it was just insane. And you don't even have like the courtesy to come through and check in on your shop. This is your shop. I treat it like it's my baby because I'm proud of what I'm doing. And that was the team that I was a part of. But it's like, do you even care?
Yeah.
Do you genuinely care about this? Because it doesn't seem that way. Because you only show up when we've been robbed.
That's big LA vibes.
Yeah. You show up when there's a problem and like a hole in the wall. Otherwise, you're just like, they can handle it. But with that being said, it's also like, well, if they don't want to handle it, they're easily replaceable.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've had a couple bosses who stopped by, but it was mostly because they were just like getting free weed all the time.
Yeah.
There's also like this big lack of, specifically for women, but lack of promoting from within. I felt like a career budtender after a long time, because it was like, am I just going to hop from store to store and never rise above this one position? And you kind of have to fight tooth and nail. So that would be my other tip for y'all out there.
I mean, it's really unfortunate. I was in a space with my cannabis mentor, and she's been on the show before. By the time the dispensary we were working at decided to expand and now is like a franchise, essentially. I mean, she had been working for them for like 10 years, and there was always this carrot on a string as far as like, you'll get your own shop. Yeah, you'll get it one day. You'll get your own shop. You'll get your own shop. And it's like, what did they do? Bring in dude from the outside. Like, it's just so sexist at times, and it's so obvious.
Is. And I think that was it's really perpetuated by that like bongs and boobs looking world that was here in the legacy days, like before even medical was like prominent. The like Big Mike era, but I'll leave that. There's another disconnect between product and budtenders, because I was fortunate to interview a CEO who stops at every shop that drops her strains, and she's like, no one does that. They tell me like, wait, you own this business? You're physically here? And that's another thing. If you want your product sold, you're going to need to educate your staff. Do you have like any memories of a brand that did like a really great job of introducing something new or staying in touch with staff? Because there's the vendor days, but those can sometimes even feel disjointed.
For sure. I'm trying to think like which brands come to mind just immediately. I do remember actually Moxie coming in, and
they had a great marketing team.
Super like communicative, and I felt that way too about 710 Labs when they came in to train us at the cafe. Just people who really cared about the budtenders education and like had gone the extra step into making it not only informative but fun, and that was something that I always appreciate as a budtender, and having like separate budtender trainings with the brands. When I worked as a brand ambassador for Kaliva, they were also really good about sending us out to do these budtender trainings and just to sit with the staff and be like, okay, what questions do you have?
That is very smart. I only worked retail in California in 215 medical days. Here in Washington, they just like drop samples at the counter and bounce out. And so like these samples are given out to people, but you might not meet the purchaser. Like they might never see the buyer. And you'll never get feedback about them. It's just kind of like you're wasting these little nuggets. And when I sold shoes, like we had demos like that. Yeah, it was a shoe salesman. That's cool. But when I sold shoes, like that was so helpful. Like it makes you a better salesperson to get a demo from an actual person who works at the brand. So yeah, other states should definitely adopt that model.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I feel like they say in retail, like 70% of your sales comes from 30% of your clients. So it's like, I would assume it's kind of the same thing when it's, a B2B situation as well. You
Absolutely
want to make an effort.
Yeah. And so you've worked both sides. You've done the demos and you've received the demos.
Yes. Yes. So I was able to know what to do and what not to do going into the demos because I had been on the other side for so long.
Yep. When did you finally decide to move on from budtending?
Well, I don't know if I've like fully moved on.
I feel like you never really do.
Yeah, like it's always like in my back pocket, kind of, But basically for me, the biggest transition happened because I'm also a writer. I did a piece on Lowell back in like 2019.
I feel like I read that. Yep.
I did a Q&A with their CEO, and that was at the top of 2019. Yeah. And he, I guess, liked what I wrote enough about them that he asked me to join their team. And then that was my transition into the Cannabis Cafe, which was still budtending, but it was in this entirely new space and like new dynamic. And then that unfortunately got closed because of COVID.
And that was, I don't think that anything has been similar to that since or before. Like that is a unique model still.
Yeah.
Perhaps New York, actually. Maybe you'll end up back home one day because New York might be open to that.
I'm totally open to that. I'm super excited about like cannabis consumption lounges and again, just like normalizing it. We have bars everywhere, liquor stores everywhere. Like we don't even have to get into that debate, but it's just like some space for us. And New York being New York, it's like, yeah, I can only imagine.
And it's legal to smoke cannabis anywhere where tobacco is legal in New York, I read. So, I mean, the door is more open than a lot of states. Would you describe the Cannabis Cafe in LA for people that aren't familiar? Like what that was?
Yeah, of course. So the Cannabis Cafe was such a unique experience. We essentially had, I forgot how many tables we had at that point, but within just like the first few months, we were already like growing and growing.
The list was so long. It was like a month-long wait to just be seated.
It was insane. Like the waits that we would have outside for walk-in. So essentially, it was our country's first legal consumption lounge where you could purchase, consume cannabis, as well as purchase food and dine in. And I say the first legal one because obviously we know there's been like some speakeasy vibes throughout the state since forever. But yeah, it was beautiful. We had this gorgeous patio. So we had 2 separate patios, one for cannabis consumption and then one for alcohol consumption, because legally you're not allowed to have the 2 cross over. So that was interesting to also navigate. And then the inside, we basically decked the entire place out with plants and brass and photographs of celebrities consuming the plant, moments in history. So we had a bunch of people's like mug shots who had been arrested for cannabis possession, including Justin Bieber's, I believe. No, I don't know. But it was just a really cool, beautiful space to be in.
It looked like it from the photos. Being from Southern California, I like check these things off. I'm like, oh, when I visit my mom, I'll go there and there. And I was really sad when COVID took that one off the list.
We all were, but it was probably like a cesspool for COVID, realistically.
Yeah, I remember checking out like bongs from the vapor room back when I lived in San Francisco. And, you know, you wonder, thinking back, like now we're in this post-COVID time when we've been so hygienic. Like I was just a disgusting person, breathing droplets everywhere I went.
I mean, really, honest. I will say, because I must. Our cleaning process for the glassware was A1, like more so than your silverware.
I'm glad you're saying that because there was a Reddit thread that was pretty rude.
There was a horrible Reddit thread. We actually addressed that. So on one of the podcast episodes with my girlfriend Bree, who also worked at the cafe, there was like a herpes gate moment.
That's what it was. Yep.
Unfortunately. And it's just so funny because she like brought it up because she was like, you know, I got it too when I'm stressed out and like we need to basically like normalize this, you know, like he wasn't even on the cannabis, which is true. He wasn't even on the cannabis side. I think he was one of our busters. So he like had nothing to do with like any of the products or the pieces, or it was just like, I don't know, this poor kid was probably just stressed and suffers from this.
Everybody has cold sores in their like makeup. I'm not a scientist, but like it's possible for every human being to get them.
Literally.
Oh, yay.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm like, you need to chill.
Never be sorry about cats.
Like, but yeah, I think there were so many eyes on us, and there were definitely so many people that probably wanted to see us fail as well.
Yeah.
It was like any little thing, it felt like a wildfire would start from it.
It was a big, giant leap to create that business. It was very exciting because as someone who lived in San Francisco a long time, like there were those places where you knew you could smoke in the back patio, and that I'm sure they still exist, but to be able to market it was a very big deal.
Yeah, it was insane. We had so much press and what I
so
don't
much
think
press.
And what I think that didn't really make it out into the press or wasn't like fully known, but I do believe majority of our owners were women.
Yeah, the head chef was a woman of color, I believe.
The head chef, yep. Chef Andrea. Drummer, I believe is the last name. Yeah.
I hope that it comes back. I do. We'll see. But it's now separated from Lowell.
Yes. So even before COVID, there was a separation. There was an uncoupling, if you will, of the cafe and Lowell, which I think was for the best for the cafe, honestly.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were writing for Lowell while you were working at the cafe?
Yes. So I started copywriting for them in July. So the cafe opened in October. So a few months before that, I remember my interview too was actually like at the cafe during construction, and they were kind of like,
interesting.
And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then realized very quickly that like I'm definitely someone who would probably rather be communicating with people while I work versus just kind of like sitting behind, a computer in my cubicle. So while this uncoupling was happening, not that you were forced to pick sides. I'm not saying that was a thing at all. But it was clear that like a line had been drawn and I wanted to be on the cafe side. So then I just went there.
I think I would have chosen the same.
Yeah.
So are you currently writing for anyone? What do you like to write about? What audiences do you like to meet halfway with your words?
So at one point over quarantine, I was doing more like writing about psychedelics and legislation pertaining to that world, which I'm fascinated by. I think it's the new wave of like alternative medicine. It's kind of like we're in like the Prop 215 days, but now for like, psilocybin and LSD. So that was cool to do. And whenever I get a chance to do those are super fun. But my favorite, I would have to say Q&As. Like I genuinely like interviewing people.
And that is something that you now do on a regular basis with That Budtender Podcast.
Yes.
Which is a lot of fun because it seems like you have a good rapport with a lot of the guests. Using kind of your retail experience, your cafe experience to like seek out these great budtenders and industry people. So when did you start the podcast and why did you start the podcast? What inspired you?
So the inspiration for the podcast probably happened 2017, 2018 would be my guess. I was probably like 2 or 3 years into budtending, and I guess I'm a storyteller at heart, and so that it just felt like the right medium and the right platform to create to give budtenders and people who you normally wouldn't hear from a chance. Because so many cannabis podcasts tend to only interview CEOs and like C-suite level employees. I was like, I need to change that.
Absolutely. I feel so kindred to you because like I started budtending, started writing, started this show based on that same inspiration. It's like so much fun to talk to you.
We pull from the same place.
Yeah, we're just like little plants growing from the same soil.
Yeah.
So how do you find your interviewees? How do you choose?
Well, having been, in the space for a minute now, a lot of them are people that I've worked with in the past. And so because I'm also recording at the moment at home, there are also people that I feel comfortable enough to invite into this space, which is why I think it translates into fun conversations for the audience to listen to. Mm-hmm. I'm just fascinated by people. It's like I'm obsessed with reality TV too. I like people's stories. So whoever, like, I don't know, there has to be something that sparks my curiosity in knowing them more and knowing them better.
You definitely have a gift for getting people to open up. Who was it? I think it was someone from Orange County and who loved plants.
Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan's episode was really fun.
Jordan's episode was hysterical. Like there's a moment where he gets so excited to shout out a budtender. Meanwhile, he's a budtender, but like a budtender that helped him. It's just like, it's such a funny, beautiful group we got to be a part of.
That kind of brings up an organic question to me because people who have budtended are very hard to budtend for. Like I am pregnant now, but when I was at the shop, like I would listen and nod and do a polite smile while they told me something was perfect for me. And I absolutely knew it was not. And then, that awkward moment where you're like, thank you for that 10-minute spiel, but can I have that over there? But then when you meet those amazing people, or you go to that shop that just like serves every type of person with respect, like I won't shut up about it. I'm kind of like a word of mouth person. I'm like, you have got to go over there, and I'm yelping and like,
yes.
So I think people who have been behind the counter definitely are apt to be giving praise where it's due. So
yeah, you want that like seal of approval, you know, essentially as a budtender. But it's kind of like if you're a chef and like someone comes in, they're like, well, I'm a food critic, you know, like there's naturally this, okay, let's see what you can do, let's see what you know. But people also smoke so differently that it's like you're not gonna nail everyone.
That actually makes me think, what was your like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like your line of questioning when you meet someone new at this shop, like how do you kind of like, because everyone's saying no indica and sativa, and it's like, well, have you ever tried to find what someone wants? Because I know that it's scientifically not the best way to refer to plants, but it's the easiest way to kind of figure someone out, because everyone's endocannabinoid system requires something different. So what was your kind of like your access to figure out what someone really wanted?
That's a great question. I think the more detailed you can get, the better, and the better you'll have. Do you hear that?
No, is it a cat?
It's a helicopter going over.
LA.
So I think the more questions you ask, and I'm not saying like be invasive, you know, but just like someone can come in and say, oh, I only smoke sativa, or I'm looking for a sativa. And even if you and I know that, like, all right, well, it's really based on the terpene profile, and like, and sure, like maybe sativas have more of these terpenes in common and indicas have more of these. And that's why there is kind of this blanket rule for both of them. But even with that, like, oh, I like sativas, it's like, okay, cool. Do you want something more energetic and like focus? Like, are you going to go work out? Are you going to go on a hike? Or do you want something that's going to be more euphoric and creative? Like, are you writing? Are you listening? Are you making music? What are you going to be doing? Give some idea of when you're going to be consuming this and what for, and then I can laser in even more.
Yeah. And that leads to due diligence. Like, unfortunately, you have to smoke everything on the wall.
Or at least communicate with your other budtenders, you know? Yeah. You would hope. I was so fortunate that like we all really got along, that it was very
fortunate at a shop.
Yeah. I didn't realize like how fortunate it was, honestly.
It can get real dramatic.
Totally. I mean, you have so many, like you said, it's so diverse. You have so many personalities. And then people who are also there and probably feeling like they're getting a little taken advantage of.
Yeah. And then, and at least in 215 in like medical shops, also people who use it medically for often undiagnosed mental issues, speaking from my own personal experience. So like you have all these gentle people with their own stuff going on in their brains interacting with each other, sometimes high, and it can really mix up in a weird smoothie.
Yeah. Oh my God. The funniest is that like one would assume like, okay, well, if I can go anywhere high, it's like to the dispensary, which I appreciate.
Oh, man.
But
it
like,
can get so weird.
If you're fried, like I can't help you. Like I'll be patient because I get it, but like I've had people come in way too stoned to just be making any purchasing decisions.
Yeah, and then you're like, are you driving? I remember when I would buy in Santa Ana and they had like dab bars and they would dab people out these huge dabs. And this was a while ago when it wasn't as normal to be dabbing. So like a lot of first timers would try to be like cool for the really cute budtenders and take these huge dabs. And I'm like, are you going to go hit the 5? Like, don't go on the highway, please.
Don't drive.
I want to walk.
Yeah. Like take a lap. Yeah. I know. I felt the same way because right before I got my job at the shop in West Hollywood, I was at a place downtown LA where they had a dab bar, and I would do it. And like in that very brief time that I was there, I was kind of like, is this okay? Like, should we be doing this?
I always wondered what people thought. Yeah. What? So you did have moments. Like, I always wondered what the actual people dabbing people out were thinking.
100%. I was thinking like, oh God, is this a good idea?
Yeah. I love dabbing CBD heavy, like wax. Like I like really heavy flower personally, but if I can find like a 1-to-1 wax that's like 1-to-1 CBD THC, it can just really like anxiety gone. It's fantastic. Or like Harlequin. Ooh. Yeah. I can't wait to pop this baby out. I'm so
we're almost there.
I know, so close. So yeah, let's get back to the podcast a little because I think it's made for me, but who's your ideal audience? Like, who are you making that for aside from just your own desire to feature these great people?
That, I think actually that's a great question. I don't know if I've really thought about like who the audience is. I think selfishly, I probably do make it for people who are in cannabis to an extent. Because we talk about things that we've all been through, like shit that you've been through, and like any other budtender can attest to, or like not even that. We've had buyers on the show, we've had content creators who run into problems creating with cannabis, like definitely people who are working with the plant. But like I said, because it is a little bit more conversational and like a very easygoing way, I think anyone can listen to it and like enjoy it, hopefully take something of value away from it. But yeah, it's mostly meant to be fun. I have realized based on our metrics that majority of the audience is female, which I love. And then also majority of the audience are between the ages of 23 and 34. So I have like millennials and Gen Z by the balls, essentially.
It is so personable, and you don't necessarily like stay, while cannabis is a constant throughout, like you don't stay just on industry stuff. Like there's a lot of people's personalities that shine through, and every episode I feel like your interview style is so nice and breezy that people are able to just kind of like blossom in their own way. And then you're like, ooh, is that what we're going to talk about? And so it is great for people. Like, I made a big deal when I first joined the industry with my parents, and like, they're very serious. They built their own like worlds from being like, they grew up, you know, pretty poor. And so like, when I was like, I got a college degree and now I'm going to budtend, like it really broke them. They really wanted me to like be an executive or whatever. For people like them who don't understand, I think it's really great to see the personalities shine of these people in the industry. Like that podcast is a great way to like realize real people work with this plant. It's not just like druggies, which isn't as usual as it was back in 2011 when I started, but like I'd have people just be like, what do you do for a living? And then just blank face kind of like walk away at a party, and you're like, bye.
yeah, literally. I was gonna take like a yoga certification course or something, and the first day we all like had to introduce ourselves and what we do, and I was budtending at the time, and I remember like the yogi guru dude like having an issue, and I was like, all right, bet, like I'm not coming back, like you're definitely not getting any more of my money. Like fuck you, I'm sorry.
That happened to me at my yoga training, and I'm being the Aries I am. I was like, well, in this book they talk about bong and it's an ancient yoga tale. I couldn't help myself. Yeah, cannabis came from India. The cannabis medicine came from Asian continents. So exactly. I think it just has to do with that stigma And a lot of, I won't even get into yoga, but like there's so many weird stigmas in yoga that hold really like dedicated yogis back from moving forward, like just down to like in Ashtanga not using props because somebody said you shouldn't, but like you can get so much better if you just put yourself on some blocks, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I loved Kundalini yoga. I was doing a lot of that before COVID, and so much chanting and things like that. And I feel like it's just a more gentle, like they're very much like use your blocks, whatever you need, like
strap it up.
Yeah. Just meet yourself where you're at today, no pressure. And then I would leave with like a natural high on life.
That's Kundalini vibes for you.
Totally.
So you've got the pod and you're writing where you feel is right. So what do you have on the horizon next for you personally? Like, what are you hoping? I feel like the plant kind of guides people who it like meets you and you're like, okay, I'll take this journey. And then you're kind of like guided through this job. Like I'll go on breaks between shops or something. Like I roasted coffee for a year, but you're always guided back. And so in a perfect world, like what do you see yourself doing next? Or is there like a space you'd love to work in?
So I would love for the podcast, obviously, to take off, you know, and get to do that more full time. Before COVID happened, I had also come up with this idea for 420 friendly speed dating.
Fun.
So I was working with Adrian, who is over at Mary Magazine. He and I and a former publicist for Lowell, we were all like working together to create heightened connections. That's what we were calling it. And literally we had it scheduled. I think the first one for like May of 2020.
Oh gosh.
Which obviously that didn't happen. But I think it would be really cool to be able to revisit that project once things are a little bit more open and casual.
Yeah.
I did do a little speed dating for research, which was really fun and interesting.
Oh my gosh. You've got good stories from that.
Definitely. But yeah, I don't know. It was just something that came to me and I was like, I think that would appeal to people. I mean, we're all so glued to our phones and it's like this Tinder culture or Hinge or Bumble, whatever the fuck you're on. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't think they fully work. In my experience and the experience of my friends, I think to be able to just like meet someone and catch a vibe and immediately like know like, hey, we're both cool with this plant. This is my relationship with it. This isn't going to be an issue, because it is something that still comes up for people in relationships where they're like afraid to come out of the cannabis closet.
Yeah. Or even worse, like as a woman who smokes pretty heavy, when you meet like a man who might not, like my sweet dear husband is really sensitive to cannabis. But like the minute we met, which thankfully was like right before apps blew up. So I have no experience with that except through friends complaining and me like really trying to feel for them. But yeah, he would like try to front that he could smoke, and then you end up in these weird interactions that are like so anxiety ridden, you know? So like to have a space, like a safe space where you can talk about your consumption and like how you do it and meet people. That's really great. That's a great idea.
I think it could be fun, and everything we do is with intention. So to bring, I mean, I'm obsessed with astrology, so I would definitely want to probably incorporate that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's everything.
Yeah, we finally had another coworker join the team that is also obsessed. So, because they all like let me be obsessed, but
I mean, anyone who's like doubtful, I'm always just like, well, have you done your birth chart?
Yeah, do you know your moon sign?
Yeah, like, do you know any of this stuff? Because once you find out, you're gonna be like, oh shit, this is.
Yeah, I mean, you could play that in, because that was another great thing. First meeting my husband, we smoked a bowl together, and he let me map his birth chart, and I was like, check, you are on the team.
All I want for people. This is all I want for people.
Yep, it's great.
Yeah.
So on a more objective view, what are you hoping to see come from the legal cannabis industry? Because we've both been doing this a long time, and I tend to get a little negative as I watch things develop. And like, for example, like this race to be publicly traded rather than like cultivating this beautiful brand, stuff like that can be so disheartening. So in a perfect ideal world, what comes from the legal cannabis industry?
In the perfect ideal world, in my opinion, there would be more transparency for sure, from brands and how they communicate with the consumers. I would love actual social equity to occur.
Wow, what a concept.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought the people who have been affected the most by the war on drugs should get a fair shot at this game? What a wild fucking concept that is. Yeah, I mean, I'm like, why isn't it 50-50? Like, why don't we have more people advocating for even more licenses for social equity applicants? That would be amazing. I think the Shrine Group.
Yeah, it was
Stizzy. I just saw on LinkedIn they post a job for a director for like that program within their company.
Nice.
And I was like, yes, that's the right step.
They've done great in like finding social equity, at least in the Bay Area. I think they have at least 2 or 3 shops where they share equity with a social equity applicant.
Amazing.
And yeah, that is really great. And then there's other states, like I know Chicago has had its challenges with, they have like training programs for social equity applicants that are run by big like white-owned multi-state operators that don't actually want these people in the industry. Yeah, so that's what I'm going back to my negative outlook. Like the regulation has taken away from a lot of the beautiful parts that were there in like 215 days. And yeah, so I think more people advocating. If you're doing business in cannabis, you should be donating money to people re-entering society that were jailed for cannabis crimes. You should be advocating for social equity.
100%.
Supporting like Black-owned brands. Yeah. Walk into a shop and be like, is this owned by a woman? Is this owned by a person of color? Like, don't be shy.
Show me what's women-owned. Show me what's Black-owned. Show me what's queer-owned.
Yep, that's another one that's completely, and like the AIDS epidemic in San Francisco is what started a lot of medical cannabis efforts. So like we need to be supporting these people that created this industry.
Right. I know you and I are both obsessed with Brownie Mary.
I love her.
And her legacy. Mary Jane, was it Rossburn was her last name?
Rathburn, I believe.
I know, it's like Brownie Mary. I'm like, you are Brownie Mary. That's it. That's how I know you. But like, yeah, like it really did start with people wanting to alleviate what the AIDS crisis produced during that time period, and they did it through cannabis.
Yep.
And they busted their butts
went to jail, and yeah,
all of it just to allow us to get to Prop 215 and then Prop 64. And it's like there's such a, like, talk about disconnect really between the two.
Well, it goes right back to what we talked about, and what draws people to bud tending is what drew like Brownie Mary and Dennis prone to that is just like being of service to the people that need you. Like when you work with a new patient, I mean, this probably doesn't happen as in rec as much, but like they tell you they're on 10 different opioids and pills from their doctor. And then after working with them 6 months, you can like actually see them in their eyes again. That's like one of my favorite things that happened bud tending over and over again. And it's just like, I hope we can hold on to that little bit. And that's why I really sought you out to interview you, because bud tenders, I think, are like the last frontier of people that do that. Aside from like the, you know, iconic brand owners here and there.
Right, which there are some for sure. There definitely are. I had a great episode with Olivia Alexander, who's the CEO.
That was a good one. Juicy, y'all. Start there.
So amazing. Like, if you are someone who is in cannabis and maybe is upper management and doesn't really know what to do, like, take a page from that girl's book, because they are doing it right. So is Lex Corwin of Stone Road. That was another great episode that we did, where it's like you can hear from those mom and pop shops, from those smaller brands, like how much they're suffering in this industry due to those bigger guys.
Yep, and the taxes. Here in Washington, they're paying like half their income from the shop in taxes. It's like pretty bananas.
No one's making money in cannabis anymore.
No, unless they're really exploiting people or the government regulated ways that things are right. Wow, brain. Yeah, exploiting just like how it's set up and have the knowledge to do that.
Exactly. Like you were talking about the social equity licenses and like having these white male organizations investing in them. So many of those relationships are based off of some really faulty paperwork that like, you know, like if the applicants can't come up with whatever it is that they're supposed to on their end, these guys are just allowed to take their license a lot of the times because they know to put that language in their contract, and like knowing that the applicant doesn't really have any other choice. It's just, sometimes it feels like people are getting set up for failure, sadly enough.
Absolutely. And so, that's what we hope for.
I know. I'm like, I want to be optimistic.
Well, I was hoping you would help me find more of it in my own soul. But it's hard out there because
you want to be optimistic, but we're also not idealists. Like we know what's happening. Yeah, we know the reality of it. And I do think it's like, just by talking about it and hopefully educating other people, we can correct those things.
Yep. Talking about it is step one. We need to be more vocal. And you're really doing that on the pod. So I want to end by asking like where people can find you. Where do you want to be followed? How can we support that Budtender podcast?
Appreciate you. So that Budtender podcast is streaming on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google, Stitcher, Ghana, the largest streaming service in India. What's up? We're currently being downloaded like all around the world. So it's like, I think wherever you are, you should be able to listen in. And we are on Instagram at That Budtender Podcast. Also on TikTok at That Budtender Podcast 2.0, because the first one got banned.
Rude.
We were doing good too. That one really hurt. And then I did just open an OnlyFans. This is the latest tea. Nobody knows this. But I did here first. Subscribe. I don't know how it works. Genuinely don't know. But apparently you could do live streams on OnlyFans now. So I think we're gonna start doing some fun stuff for the podcast and just some really fun stuff that we can't do on the other platforms.
I used to always say when I was in my 20s, I was like, I wish that there was a market for me to just like smoke bong rips on video and people could watch. So you get it, girl.
That's literally what it like. This is the vision. The vision is we release an episode weekly, and then a couple days after we're gonna go on live stream. I love to eat. I love to smoke. So maybe people will pay to watch me do both and just get hella high and do some mukbangs and talk about the latest episode.
That's just good marketing, in my opinion.
I mean, what more could people ask for? I'm playing with this sweats and bra concept. I feel that's the most they're going to get is me in a bra and in sweatpants. Let's be real.
Yeah. And you could have some cute matching sets. Get sponsored. Yeah. I love this. I love this for you. OnlyFans, That Budtender Podcast. Well, amazing. Bianca, I'm so happy you could join me today and spend some time talking about your experience and, cannabis retail. It's so nice to talk to a fellow former budtender.
Yes, I know. It's always so nice to talk to fellow former budtenders.
And for all of you out there, this is The Fresh Cut. I'm Cara Wietstock, culture editor at Ganjapreneur. You can check out the latest episodes on our YouTube channel, and you can keep up with when they're coming out by following Ganjapreneur on all your socials. So thanks for joining us today.
Yay. Thank you for having me.